Hello watch enthusiasts! Now today I'm producing my first review of the new year, and it's a piece which I've been working on trying to include on the channel for a few months now, and which has been interesting to see now over the last few days. And this is the Sartory-Billard SB02, a watch produced by a small French company which is producing its second watch in the form of this piece, and is a much more accessible alternative to their first piece, which was much more expensive and more exclusive due to the fact that it was designed originally purely for the owners of the company as a birthday present, if you will. But I really like the direction they've gone with this piece, which is a highly customizable piece with a very, very different case design, finishing which is extraordinary for the price this watch is offered for, and also a level of customization with, as you can see, this style of bezel, which comes in a variety of different forms, which I have here with me, and which creates a watch which is a really interesting alternative for someone who wants something which is simply a direction off the beaten track for a luxurious feeling, extremely well built and wonderfully well designed watch under £1,000. And as I start this video, I would of course like to give my usual disclaimer that I'm not being paid in any way to produce a positive review. This watch has been very kindly sent to me for the purposes of the review, with a set of extra bezels to show you in the review, and also some straps to demonstrate the different options for this timepiece. And I would also like to make the usual statement that if I don't like a watch, or I don't feel that it's of a high enough quality to show on the channel, I simply return it to the manufacturer, because I feel it would be disingenuous and frankly misleading to suggest or promote something which I don't believe in terms of its quality, its design, or the integrity of the brand behind it. And so without any further ado, I'd like to begin this video on this rather interesting 39mm watch with a very alternative case design and rather an interesting story behind it too. And the story behind this watch and this brand is, I feel, just as charming as the watch itself, because this brand was founded by Ludovic Sartory and Armand Billard, and yes, there is someone else in the watch industry who shares a name with me. And they were coming up with an interesting piece, the RPM01, for their 40th birthday. And this was a watch which was much higher priced in terms of its production, was all made in France, and cost just under €3,000. And so we're sitting in a very different price tag with a 47mm case. But due to the success of this watch and being sold to more than just the two of them, they moved towards producing watches as a company, and so this is the product in the form of the SB02. And this approaches a much more affordable sort of price mark, between €650 and about $750 to $800, depending upon the version and the configuration you go for. But I think for that price it offers a heck of a lot, because the finishing on this watch and the detailing is quite wonderful to behold, and the customization, I think, is just enough to make the watch a very interesting piece without going over the top and creating something which loses a single image of what the watch should look like, which I think is always a danger with customization, and is something which this watch has quite squarely missed, which I think is excellent and very good news. And so speaking about the dimensions first of all, bearing in mind the Richard Mille-esque case shape, one might assume this watch is overbearing in terms of sizing, but not so. The watch is 39mm from side to side, bearing in mind the bezel has a slight overhang, with a 45mm lug-to-lug length, making it nice and snug on the wrist, in addition to a 12.5mm thickness, which is surprisingly slender, bearing in mind the fact that curved bezel protrudes a long way out of the case, and yet it still remains this rather slim thickness. And so I think the dimensions of the watch are very well chosen, and I can understand wanting to go for this size, especially because 39mm means that the length of the case is slightly longer, and so one's able to have this slim width, but still the large crown protrudes and is easy to use. And the design of this watch is what I would call very futuristic, but I think this is a watch which appeals to the sort of market which, at a higher price tag, something like a Vacheron Constantin overseas would appeal to. And I say this because it's the sort of watch which gives an elegance and an everyday wearability which I think is excellent in terms of its design, but also is quite sporty and has a 100-metre water resistance in the case of this timepiece, despite not having a screw-down crown. But I'll speak about the crown later because it's quite a beautiful piece of engineering. The finishing is interesting throughout because one has brushed sides to the case, and it's a very fine brushing, a brushing which I wouldn't expect to see at this price mark, as well as polishing over the edges of the lugs, and of course one can't see the underside of this bezel, where indeed all of the customization happens, but above it one sees a polished rim to this part of the bezel which holds the crystal, which is a separate piece to this piece which screws on and off, which also has a lengthways longitudinal brushing to it over the top, which gives a very interesting aesthetic and catches the light extremely gracefully and very attractively. Turning the watch over, it's possible to see the decoration of the watch, which I think is nicely done, and it's not an extremely deep engraving on the caseback, but it's much more than laser etched, and one can very much feel the texture with polished and more bead blasted elements to give this globe a very attractive and very striking appearance. Also, I think it should be noted that the caseback sits very flush with the back of the watch, so as you can see there's no heavy doming to the back of the watch, which means it sits very flat on the wrist, which I think is helpful because it has short lugs, so rather than taking up more wrist than it needs to, it sits very comfortably and squarely in the middle, though of course I'll show you this when I'm wearing it on the wrist. And on the back it simply shows that it has an automatic movement. Of course it shows the brand and the model name. Also, this watch is assembled in France, which is interesting to see and nice to see as well, bearing in mind the price range this watch sits in. And of course the parts won't be made in France because, quite frankly, for this price it's nigh on impossible to produce this sort of watch in that way. But I do appreciate the fact that these are assembled and quality controlled in France, which adds to the value of this watch at its particular price tag. Now, turning the watch over, I think what immediately catches the eye, apart from the bezel, which I'll speak about when I get out the rest of the bezels they sent me to give you a comparison of what the options are, is the dial. And as you can see, the dial is this multi-part form, and I can see different contributing factors to the design of this dial, with the outer rim of the dial being finished in this sunburst effect, which is available either in silver or in anthracite, depending upon what sort of watch you want, whether you want a light or a dark appearance. These then have faceted and applied metal markers, as you can see, which are luminous, which is an interesting touch, and I'll show you that during the Lume shot later on in the video. Around the edge one also has this sort of Datejust-esque style of railway track, except unlike a Datejust, this doesn't use Roman numerals, but rather uses Arabic, which I think is a helpful element by bringing this watch into the modern age, in a way which one doesn't see from a Datejust dial in quite the same way with this configuration. But apart from that hint or slightly alluding factor to a Datejust, the rest of the dial is unique, because the centre of the dial is sunken, as you can see, and also is translucent. And as I'll show you when I'm showing you the movement, the date window appears at 3 o'clock underneath the minute hand at the present time, but also one sees that beneath it one can see through and see the top of the movement, which is more or less visible depending upon whether you go for the lighter dial or the darker dial, but also you can see the interesting components, such as the date-changing mechanism, operate when it crosses the 12 o'clock mark. Then one also has an applied logo in this particular form, and the signing of the dial at 6 o'clock, which gives very, very good balance and a very clean appearance to the watch, with Paris, France at the bottom of the dial. Then if one turns the watch to its side, the crown is a major factor in the appearance of this watch, because you can see it takes a very industrial sort of look, but is finished beautifully. And I hope you can see the fact that it's actually ribbed around its outer edge, and so these knurlings don't extend right to the edge of the crown, which means that if you look at the crown from this side, it looks like a simple ring of brushed steel, which I think is extremely well executed. Then aside from the brushed and polished finishes which are seen on the crown, one sees a bead-blasted centre with the Sartory-Billard logo very, very deeply placed within the crown itself. And the crown is quite easy to use, although the fingers do often catch on the bezel, which isn't too much of a problem if you simply operate it like so. But one could see how someone might have trouble pulling it out if they had very short nails and were having trouble with this, as you can see. But if one gets a good grasp on the crown, one's able to pull it out and then operate the hands quite easily. But in terms of the hands themselves, one sees they are this stick or baton style of hand with a bevel down their centre. And whilst they're not the most detailed hands in the world, I think they do an extremely good job of matching the dial and also matching the general appearance of this watch. Now, looking at the watch, the front of this piece shows a very interesting interplay of shapes, because when looking at it from a sort of a very sharp angle, as you can see, one has this interplay of different forms, with that anti-reflective sapphire crystal giving very high legibility, but also being domed very slightly outwards, and this has a very interesting interplay with that bezel, which protects the crystal, but also provides the opposite shape, and so one has this interesting appearance which I wouldn't expect to see, and which shows real care in the design of this timepiece. But speaking about the movement of this watch, this uses the Miyota 8215, which is a relatively rudimentary Japanese movement. It's an automatic movement with a 40-hour power reserve, which runs at 3 Hz, and so you can see it runs at a slightly lower beat rate than one sees on, for example, the newer 9015 Miyota, or indeed from an ETA 2824, which is not too much of a bother. Personally, it doesn't bother me, although it's something to be aware of if you're buying this watch, that if you're used to 4 Hz from a mechanical watch, this might appear a little bit more stuttery in terms of the second hand. And again, my only other complaint with this movement is it isn't hacking. So you don't get hacking, but you do get hand winding. So as you can see, it winds very easily and very smoothly. And then, of course, if one pulls the crown out, it doesn't hack, but does have a nice and quick movement to the date, which, as you can see, moves beneath that dial, and you can see the date wheel move. But I must say, considering the amount of money which is invested into the customizational element of this watch, and also the sheer quality of the case design, the quality of the crystal, and the general quality of the build, I must say I think this is a wholly acceptable movement. Though, of course, it would have been nice to see a Miyota 9015. I can understand the choice, and I imagine the price added to this watch by that choice of movement would change the general value of the timepiece as a whole. But the one element of this watch which I haven't spoken about yet is the customization, which is a key component of this watch and really adds to the value. Because as you can see, this watch comes on this rather interesting style of strap, and as you can see from the colour of this leather one, they come in a very interesting range of colours. And there really is a very, very broad range of straps available. But bearing in mind the lug shape of this watch, they suit the watch phenomenally well. Because with its short, polished lugs, it works very, very well to have a strap with these shoulders. And so they're actually 18mm between the lugs, but a full 23mm from side to side. And so this creates this wonderful seamless flow. And so it gives the feel of what you might see as an integrated strap, but the versatility and the customization of being able to put any strap on the watch, provided it's 18mm across, which I think is nicely chosen, and means that you get the best of both worlds, really. And the strap tapers down to 20mm. And the quality of the leather ones is really very, very good, with a nice waxy edge to the strap, as you can see. Very well placed holes, and full stitching across, with nice backing. One does also see some other straps available with, as you can see here, a white strap as an available option, which I have here as well, which gives a very, very different look to the watch, but also the option of this rather attractive suede velvet style black, which gives a completely different look to the watch and really helps one with the appearance of the watch if you wanted to wear it to a different occasion than you would, for example, with that bright orange strap. But then, of course, there's the bezel, which is a key component to the customization of this watch, and it comes in a wide variety of different variants. And as you can see, on the watch at the present time is this wonderful and beautifully textured style of carbon bezel, which gives this very space-age and futuristic look to the watch. And this is a limited edition bezel, and so it's nice to be able to show it on the channel at this point. But otherwise, one does have a variety of different steel and acetate bezels. Now, the acetate bezels come in a particular style of translucent form, and so they come either in blue at the present time, or indeed in a colour which is a bit like tortoiseshell on glasses. Then there are also some other rather curious types, such for example as a brass bezel, which gives a sort of bronze and brass colour to the watch, and is something a bit different if you want something a bit more steampunk or retro. But most bezels in the range are some form of steel. And so in terms of the ones I don't have here to show you today, well, there's a variety of different finishes to the steel itself. And so polished steel bezels are available, in addition to bead-blasted bezels, sunburst steel bezels, and also linear brushed ones, where the brushing follows this line of the case in the same way as the narrow internal bezel of the watch. But otherwise, these steel bezels come really in 2 finishes. And these 2 finishes come either in this ceramic-coated finish or in a painted finish. Speaking about the ceramic-coated bezels first, they're a steel sort of substrate, if you will, onto which this very hard and very resilient ceramic coating is applied. And this makes the bezels, from daily wear, from having worn these for a few days, I can say it makes them resilient to the abrasions and bumps and knocks of daily wear, and they keep their colour very, very well in this matted appearance. So as you can see, this is a green coloration to it, but one also has black in this appearance, as well as this more bright orange sort of solution, if you want something a bit different. And then, of course, one has just the bare matted steel, which is an interesting look and something which I think will go if someone enjoys different finishes. So I can see someone enjoying all of the different steel bezels and interchanging between them depending upon what they feel like. But then one has a slightly less scratch-resistant option, but perhaps a more interesting one. And this is a hand-painted bezel, which is done in France on steel. So as you can see, the base of it is steel, as you can see from underneath, but it's then hand painted into a number of configurations. And this particular one is a limited edition model in the Pista line, but one does also have a number of other versions and options with different stripes or full colours. And these are also available upon custom order, so you can have them produced to your particular specifications, which is a very interesting direction to go and gives you really full control of the customization of your watch. Now, this is much less scratch resistant than the ceramic coating, and I will stress that you do have to be a little bit more careful with this. It's not going to resist enormous amounts of bumps and knocks because it is paint as opposed to being a hard coating. And so one can see that around the inside, for example, of these holes where the screw has gone in, some of the paint has been removed, as appears to be quite normal. But I think that just demonstrates the fact that these aren't as scratch resistant if you bump them against metal. But for daily wear, I can see this being a really enjoyable option, a really nice way of being able to customise your watch. And just to give you an idea of how the customisation works with these watches, each is supplied with spare screws, but also with this tool to remove the bezel. And the screws are very well machined and easy to use, and it's very difficult to burr them, which is often a problem with screwed elements on a watch. And so as you can see, the bezel, once you've taken off the screws, simply pops off like so, onto which you can then install a new bezel, and you see it slots on like so, and then one simply does up the screws to secure it in place. Now, where the lume of this watch is concerned, as you can see, the timepiece doesn't actually have any lume on the second hand, but rather does have lume on all of the indices, as well as on the hours and the minutes. And this lasts a relatively long amount of time for the amount applied, so I've seen about 5 or 6 hours out of this, with a still legible sort of level of lume. And of course it's no Seiko SKX or Marine Master where the depth of the lume is concerned, but it does last without too much fade for a relatively long period of time, and I think for a dress watch or a sort of sporty dress watch, it's very, very much adequate, and in fact is more than I've seen on a lot of watches in the same sort of price segment. Now, on my wrist, which is 7 inches in circumference, the watch wears very well, and the fact the strap is very supple and in leather does help the watch. And in terms of its design, that short lug-to-lug length does mean the watch sits very comfortably on the top of my wrist, and whilst it's not the most slender watch at 12mm thick, as a result of that curve, it really is only the apex of the watch which reaches that sort of height. The rest of the watch nestles itself quite close to the wrist, with those short lugs allowing the strap to really take the strain of being held to the wrist tightly. And this means you can get a very, very comfortable fit, and a very reliable fit as well, which is to be appreciated, I think, from a watch at this sort of price tag. And I think the ergonomics of the watch are also extremely well conceived, because the crown doesn't dig into the wrist at all, and is somewhat protected by that bezel, which, as you can see, overlaps it somewhat. And so you're able to have the best of both worlds, with a large crown and a highly legible but large dial, on a watch which is bold and modern, but doesn't become overbearing, and I think is a very wearable everyday option for a lot of people, whether they have large or small wrists, as a result of its short 45mm lug-to-lug length. And so in conclusion, I think this is a pretty marvellous watch in terms of incorporating a number of very interesting and very advanced features, such as these ceramic-coated bezels, which are very finely done, as well as hand-painted bezels, and even those carbon bezels into a very accessible and compact sort of frame and build at a price tag which is very accessible as well. And I think from a small brand which is moving into this market, they've done a very, very comprehensive job of including these different features and building a watch which is both interesting to look at and also very easy to wear as something which is both casual but also quite smart if you choose a steel bezel, for example. And I think also the choice of straps with that link directly into the wrist and also into the watch case itself creates a very interesting look, and which I think will appeal to a lot of people. And so do tell me in the comments down below what you thought of this video, and indeed of this watch, as something very, very different to the channel. And so if you did enjoy the video, then do please like, share and subscribe to help the channel, and also to be able to see more videos and content here in future. So thank you very much for watching. This is Arm the Watch Guy, out.